Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload. The living room buzzed with conversation, the kind of weekend gathering that fills a house with warmth. Glasses clinked, music played low in the background, and our closest friends lounged on the couch or leaned against the counters, trading stories and laughter. I had always loved hosting, creating a space where people could relax, eat, and forget the stress of their lives. That night should have been no different. But then, as the group swapped jokes, my wife leaned back with a mischievous smile and said words that shifted everything. I'd gladly trade my husband for that tall, dark guy with a huge Johnson. She laughed, as though it were the most harmless thing in the world, and nudged her wine glass like she'd just scored a punchline. The room went silent. Not gradually, not politely. Silent in a sharp, cutting way that makes the air heavy. Our friends stared, some in shock, some in pity, others waiting for me to say something. She kept grinning, eyes darting around, clearly expecting the laughter to roll on. But it didn't. I sat there, holding my glass, my face calm. Inside, though, her words hit harder than I expected. It wasn't the first time she had made little digs, playful jabs disguised as humor. She had joked about me being boring, too serious, too focused on work. I had always brushed it off, convinced myself not to overthink. But this time, in front of everyone, she turned our marriage into a punchline that wasn't funny. I didn't react right away. I let the silence linger, let her stew in the awkwardness she had created. And then I spoke, steady and clear. "Funny you should say that," I said, setting my glass on the table. "Because while you were busy joking about trading me, I was busy upgrading my life already." Her smile froze. Everyone shifted, sensing the weight behind my words. I didn't elaborate then. I didn't need to. The room brimmed with tension, and she suddenly looked smaller than she had 5 seconds ago. I stood up, excused myself, and walked into the kitchen to refresh my drink. Laughter eventually resumed in the living room, but it was uneasy, thinner, as if everyone now understood the invisible line that had been crossed. Later that night, after the guests left and dishes piled in the sink, she cornered me in the hallway. "You embarrassed me," she snapped. I turned slowly, meeting her eyes. "You embarrassed yourself." All I did was let the truth hang in the air. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. She stormed off to bed, slamming the door, and I sat in the quiet house, staring at the mess she had made not just of the evening, but of us. Over the next days, cracks widened. Friends who had been at the gathering messaged me privately, some apologizing for not saying anything, others outright telling me she'd crossed a line. One even admitted they had seen her getting a little too close to someone at work during a recent outing, though they hadn't wanted to stir trouble. That confession lit a fire inside me, not of rage but of determination. I began paying closer attention. Her late nights at the office stretched longer, excuses piling up like bricks. She clung to her phone, shielding the screen as if the light itself would betray her. I didn't accuse her, not yet. I just observed, letting her build her tower of lies higher, knowing the higher it rose, the harder it would fall. One evening she came home flustered, muttering about a delayed meeting. I watched her place her purse on the counter, the zipper slightly open. While she showered, I glanced inside. Receipts. One for dinner at a restaurant we had never been to together. 2 meals, wine, dessert, paid in cash. I placed the receipt back exactly where I found it. That night, I acted normal, even kissed her goodnight. She smiled, relieved, unaware that her own carelessness had already started unraveling her web. I started planning, not for confrontation, but for something larger. She had made me a joke in front of friends, tried to paint me as less of a man with her careless words. I wasn't going to yell or beg or fight. I was going to make sure that when the truth came out, it left no room for her to twist it. The opportunity came faster than I expected. My company announced I'd be leading a major presentation at a regional conference, an event where industry leaders and colleagues would gather. It was a chance not just to showcase my work, but to prove something. To myself, to everyone watching, and maybe even to her. In the weeks leading up to it, I doubled down on preparation. Early mornings, late nights, rehearsals until I could deliver the presentation in my sleep. And all the while, I let her think she still held the upper hand. She'd smirk at me, make little comments about how I worked too much, how I wasn't fun anymore. I'd smile back, letting her believe the performance. On the day of the conference, the hall buzzed with energy. Hundreds of people filled the seats, cameras set up at the back to record. I walked on stage to applause, my name echoing in the introductions. As I spoke, confidence flowed. Not just about the subject I knew well, but about the fact that I was reclaiming every piece of dignity she had tried to strip away. Midway through the talk, my eyes scanned the crowd. And there she was. My wife, seated near the front, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. I didn't flinch. I didn't falter. I delivered every word as if she weren't even there. When the talk ended, the audience rose in a standing ovation. The applause thundered through the hall, people cheering, shaking my hand, congratulating me. And there she sat, frozen, unable to join in, realizing that the man she mocked, the man she turned into a joke, was the one commanding respect from hundreds of people. I didn't look at her again. I didn't need to. Her silence in that moment was louder than her cruelest words. That was just the beginning of what nobody saw coming. The applause from the conference still thundered in my head when I stepped off stage. People lined up to shake my hand, swap cards, ask follow-ups. I answered each one, steady and present, while a part of me watched the doors for her. She hovered near the aisle as if torn between leaving and pretending she had come to support me all along. When I finally walked past, she opened her mouth like she might speak, then closed it and stared at the floor. That was the last I saw of her that day. On the ride home, my phone lit up with congratulations. Co-workers, clients, even old classmates who'd seen the live stream. A few messages from friends who had witnessed the living room joke chimed in too. Proud of you. You killed it. That's the way you answer without saying a word. I turned the sound off and drove in silence, the kind that doesn't hurt anymore. She was waiting by the kitchen island, elbows on marble, glass of water untouched. You were great, she said. Really? I didn't realize. I knew you were good at your job, but I didn't know you could hold a room like that. Rooms listen when you give them something worth hearing, I said, hanging my jacket. It wasn't a jab. It was simply true. She followed me down the hall. About the other night, I was trying to be funny. Everyone was joking. I pushed it too far. I'm sorry. Thank you for saying that, I answered. But we both know the line didn't come out of nowhere. Her eyes flashed the way they do when a door's been opened she wanted to keep shut. You're still mad. I'm awake, I said. There's a difference. For a week, the house ran on a truce. She cooked more, laughed easier, reached for my hand when we walked the dog. I let the gestures exist without grading them. But goodwill doesn't erase math. The receipts I'd photographed, the late nights that never matched her calendar, the team dinners where the same name paid the check, those facts sat quietly in a folder I kept to myself. On Wednesday, she said she needed to pick up a charger from her office. I'll be 20 minutes, she promised, already slipping on sneakers. I nodded, opened my laptop, and watched the small dot of her location drift not toward her building, but to a wine bar 2 neighborhoods away, the same place the cash dinner receipt had named. I didn't storm over. I wrote an email to HR asking for travel forms I claimed to have misplaced, then called a locksmith and scheduled an appointment for the weekend in case of a sticky cylinder. Preparing isn't paranoia when you've already heard the punchline. By Friday, I had enough small pieces to make a whole without guessing. A florist charge on a day I'd been out of town. A rideshare to a boutique hotel near the stadium after a client happy hour. A selfie she posted with coworkers, cropped tight, then deleted in 2 minutes after a friend commented with a winking emoji and the letters HMU. Screenshots don't argue. They wait. I didn't want a public scene. I wanted a clean ending. Still, there was a part of the story that needed to be written where it had begun. In our living room, among the same friends who'd watched her turn our marriage into a joke. So I invited them over for board games and dessert the following Saturday. She was thrilled, giddy even, imagining a reset. I let her choose the playlist and the snacks and the candle that always makes people ask what smells so good. Our friends trickled in with bottles and easy laughter. For an hour it almost felt like the old days. Stories layered over music. Arguments about rules to games we never fully learned. The undertow of comfort that comes when everyone knows where the glasses are kept. She performed warmth well. I poured coffee, refilled bowls, and waited for the room to find that small stillness that means it's listening. When it did, I stood by the TV and said, "I want to clear something from the air we all share." Her eyes snapped to me. A few friends exchanged glances. I lifted the remote and pulled up a short black slide with white text. 3 lines, 3 dates, 3 places. No names, no photos. Nothing that would humiliate anyone more than the truth already could. The room went quiet the way it had the night she made her joke, but this time there was no smirk to follow it. "I'm not here to make a spectacle," I said. "I'm here to return things to their proper size. I was made into a punchline in this room. I'm closing the set." I turned the TV off and set the remote down. "We're separating. It's amicable on my end because silence can be kind. Please don't choose sides, just choose decency." She stood abruptly. "You can't do this here." "We did this here already," I answered, and even the people who wanted to defend her didn't find a script. She left the room and someone cleared their throat with the sound of a curtain falling. Conversation resumed slowly. Gentle, practical, careful around me the way you are around a friend who has just set down something heavy. We finished the cake. People hugged me goodnight without saying too much, which is a version of love I'll always respect. When the door clicked behind the last guest, she reappeared, fury tinted with fear. "You humiliated me?" "You humiliated yourself," I said. "I refuse to be your prop again." She pointed at the blank TV. "You planned that, like a show." "I planned an ending," I said. "We needed one." For 2 days we lived in separate rooms, passing each other like coworkers who shared a job description and nothing else. She sent a long message to the group chat the next morning, claiming we were taking space to realign. No one responded with the energy she hoped for. People are kinder than we give them credit for. They know when to let a story end. On Monday, the locksmith arrived. New locks, new codes, new logic to the front door. I texted her the code and added, "You may come and go until the end of the month. After that, please coordinate with me." She replied with a thumbs up, and then, an hour later, with a 4-paragraph essay about commitment and forgiveness. I didn't answer either. That afternoon, HR called about my missing travel forms. In the packet was a schedule of every offsite my department had covered this quarter. Her name wasn't on any of them. The one she'd bragged about attending, where the bar tab matched the receipt I'd photographed, didn't exist. I thanked the coordinator and closed my office door, not to cry, not to rage, but to breathe the way you breathe when a long-suspected shape finally becomes a solid line. I spent the next week moving my essentials into a small furnished place I found a mile away. Month to month, good light, a kitchen that wanted to be used. I didn't announce it. I simply formed a new route home. At the old house, I gathered her boxes, labeled them by room, and stacked them by the entry so she wouldn't need to roam. I left the ring box on the mantel with a note inside, "Return to sender." On Friday evening, as I carried a final tote to my car, a sedan rolled up. The tall guy from the party climbed out of the passenger seat. He looked smaller without the room watching him. His wedding band was gone, the pale indention where it had been remained. He nodded at me as if we were teammates switching shifts. My jaw loosened on instinct, then set. "She's inside," I said, opening the door and stepping aside. He moved past me with the confidence of someone who thinks he's winning. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "I'm his wife. Thank you for the screenshots." I stared at the words and felt the world click again. Another person choosing truth over performance. I typed, "I wish you peace." She wrote back, "You too." At midnight, our mutual friend Mia texted, "Are you okay?" I answered honestly, "I am." She replied, "Good. Also, you should check your email." She'd forwarded an invite to a charity gala 2 weeks out. The organizer had been at the conference and wanted me to give a short talk about leadership and steadiness under pressure. I said yes before doubt could bargain me down. The next days tied themselves into neat knots. My routines found new places to stand. I slept without alarms waking me at 3 a.m. to remind me of things I could not fix. I cooked simple food and ate it at a small table by a window that watched the street. The quiet didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like a room I'd earned. On the morning of the gala, I ironed a shirt I actually liked and tied a tie that didn't feel like a leash. The venue glowed with glass and soft light. People in suits and gowns milled around with the relief of doing something generous. Backstage, the coordinator pressed a mic into my hand, and squeezed my shoulder. "Say what you said at the conference," she whispered. "Just say it to people who need to hear it." When they called my name, I walked out to a warm ripple of applause. I spoke about boundaries that make love possible, about dignity that doesn't demand attention, about how sometimes the kindest thing you can do for both people is to accept the truth quickly and act on it. I didn't say her name. I never will. The point was never to win a courtroom. It was to live in a house with windows again. Midway through, a movement near the back caught my eye. She had come. She wore the same practiced expression from our parties. Pleasant, curious, impossible to read if you didn't already know the script. I kept talking, the room leaned in. When I finished, something happened I hadn't expected even after the conference. The entire hall stood. People clapped until I laughed and the lights warmed my face. In that wave of sound, I looked once more to the back. She didn't clap. She didn't move. She sat with her hands balled in her lap as if applause were a storm, and she was bracing for it to pass. For the first time since the night she turned me into a joke, I felt nothing sharp. No triumph, no ache, just distance measured in growth. Afterward, people shook my hand, told me pieces of their own stories in low voices, asked for a sentence they could keep in their pocket for later. I gave them the one I had learned the hard way. You don't have to stay where you're made small to prove you're big. She slipped out before I reached the doors. A friend told me she had been seen earlier with the tall man from the party, then alone, then standing by the coat check as if waiting for a pass to come claim her. No one did. That isn't my victory. It's just the weather. I walked into the night and let the cool air rinse the heat from the room. My phone chimed with a message from Mia. "You were brilliant. Proud of you." I typed back, "Thank you." Then I added, because it was finally and fully true, "I'm good." What came next would surprise people who only like stories with fireworks. I went home to a quiet apartment, steamed dumplings, and a book I'd been saving. I sat by the window and listened to the city, which didn't know my name and didn't need to. I thought about the living room joke that used to burn and realized it had turned into something else entirely. A mile marker I'd already passed. No viral twist, no dramatic confrontation. Just a man who chose respect, locked his door, and walked onto a stage he'd built himself. That was the part nobody saw coming. The weeks after the gala unfolded with a rhythm I hadn't known in years. Mornings began with calm instead of tension. Evenings ended without arguments over nothing. People I barely knew reached out after seeing my talk, sharing pieces of their own lives, thanking me for speaking truths they'd been too afraid to voice. What had once been my private pain was turning into a source of strength for others. Meanwhile, her world kept shrinking. Friends who once laughed at her sharp jokes now avoided her. The man from the party, her so-called escape, was gone too, swept back into the mess he'd created in his own marriage. I heard he'd moved out of his family's home and into a small apartment across town. Whatever illusion she'd clung to had evaporated. She tried reaching out again. First came texts, then voicemails, then letters slipped under my door. The same refrain echoed in all of them. "I was wrong. I didn't mean it. We can fix this." But the problem was never just one bad night or one cruel joke. It was the pattern of disrespect, the way she thought I'd always stay, no matter how many times she chipped away at me. I didn't respond, not out of cruelty, but because silence was the only language left between us. One night I was invited to speak at a university. The students wanted to hear about resilience, how to recover from setbacks in work and life. I stood before them, telling the story without names, without bitterness, focusing on the lesson instead of the wound. As I spoke, I noticed a figure in the back row. Her. She looked smaller than I remembered, her once bold posture gone. She listened without moving, as if each word was a mirror she couldn't look away from. When the talk ended, the students rose in applause. She didn't. She sat frozen, her face pale, her hands clenched tightly together. And just like before, I didn't need to confront her. The silence of her seat amid a standing crowd was punishment enough. Afterward, people came up to thank me, to share their own stories, to tell me how my words gave them hope. I left the auditorium smiling, not because I'd proven anything to her, but because I no longer needed to. The real revenge was never the locks I changed or the words I saved. It wasn't about humiliating her in front of friends or making her regret what she'd lost. The real revenge was this. I had built a life she could no longer enter, no matter how many times she knocked. And her punishment? It wasn't anger or bitterness. It was having to watch me thrive in a world where her voice no longer mattered. I walked out of that university into the cool night air, my head clear, my heart steady. For the first time, I didn't think about her at all. That was the ending nobody saw coming.